All right, let's try and get into the real nitty-gritty here on immigration. I want to see if we can expose the key issues that might help make a deal or stand in the way of a deal. And just to make sure all the views are represented at the table, Jason is going to be channeling Nancy Pelosi. No, he's not.
We share the same birthday.
Well, there you go. All right.
But that's about the only thing I have in common with Nancy Pelosi is the birthday.
You have better hair. So.
Well, I live in the Bay Area, you know. Okay, so
I'm Italian.
So we've all got
I'm from California.
Okay.
Oh, that'll do. All right, so I'm going to try and, bring that to the table so it's fair and balanced, as we say. My starting assumption is that the offer the president made last weekend, a limited trade of $5.7 billion for border security in exchange for 3-year protection for Dreamers and those under TPS, well, that's already been rejected. So we need something new. My starting point for that is this interesting comment from candidate Donald Trump in the 2016 campaign. Take a look.
They'll pay back taxes. They have to pay taxes. There's no amnesty as such. There's no amnesty.
Right.
But we work with them. Everybody agrees we get the bad ones out. But when I go through and I meet thousands and thousands of people on this subject, and I've had very strong people come up to me, really great, great people come up to me, and they've said, Mr. Trump, I love you. But to take a person that's been here for 15 or 20 years and throw them and the family out, it's so tough, Mr. Trump. I mean, I have it all the time. It's a very, very hard thing.
Interesting. So that says something to me along the lines of the 2013 Gang of Eight plan might be the place to start. How about that? Minus the citizenship part. Donald Trump there wasn't talking about citizenship, but some kind of legal status short of citizenship. That might be enough to get me, taking the position of Nancy here, to the table to really start to deal. So let's start with that. Let's start with the Gang of Eight. I know this is a total disdain from conservatives, but we put the key points on the screen there. It had, really solid money for the border wall. It had E-Verify. Everyone agrees that's very important. More border guard. There was a lot of good things in there.
Here's the problem, is that we've had those agreements before, as we all know, including with President Reagan, when we had the first amnesty, if you will, for I think at the time it was 2 to 3 million individuals. Also promised in that bill, in that agreement, was stronger border security and the employment aspect, neither of which happened. So what conservatives say back is, and what the argument has been, okay, but then the border first and a reinforcement of what happens when it comes to employment, that these other things that are always promised that never seem to happen, it can't be this, and this was the Gang of Eight dynamic, was, this amnesty first, or this, allowing of them in first, because we knew, and this is where not just conservatives, but Americans in general, we've seen the other not happen. So the solution has to at least be, and I agree, I think Americans, we know, very generous people, we've not had a problem with these conversations. What we have a problem with is being hoodwinked, is being cheated, and is being lied to. And that is what Congress has been doing for 25 years, at least certainly since President Reagan. That's what we don't want any more of. The president's going to have to wield something that makes it clear that the security is going to happen first and that we will not be hoodwinked this time.
Okay, but I'll put it back to you from the Democrat side. What you're currently proposing is a permanent structure on the border security in exchange for a temporary thing on what we care about in terms of Dreamers and people under TPS. And, why should we accept that? It's something permanent for something temporary.
Yeah, I think President Trump has to somehow, in a persuasive way, make the case to the country that the status quo for the last 25 years or so has been Democrats wanted more voters and business-type Republicans wanted cheap and exploitable labor.
Yeah.
So there has to be some middle ground there. And I think Tammy's precisely right. I mean, we cannot have a rerun of the 1986 Act.
No, I got it. But the big problem, as I mentioned, is the E-Verify that was, sorry, it wasn't called that then, but that was promised and totally not delivered.
But here's the middle ground, if I just may insert here. Maybe the middle ground is temporary, and then as we see border sections developed and done, then it moves into some level of permanence, so everyone has an interest in the wall actually being finished.
Very
so
creative.
maybe it is temporary. And then that is the basis of, well, let's see if we have success here. If we have success here,
so
then there'll be another level.
So you've got conditional steps
exactly.
along the road, like little. That's really interesting. I mean, have they tried that before?
Well, you got to remember how radical the left has become, because they said they were for the fence, they voted for the fence, but now they're to the point where Kamala Harris, who's announced that she's running for president, these are people that want to abolish ICE. They like sanctuary cities. They call the wall immoral. They don't support the federal workers.
It's chaos.
There are tens of thousands of people who put their lives in line to protect our border. They don't support them. So let's get real about what you're going to be able to do and not do. I want to get rid of the rewards and incentives to come here illegally. I want to get serious about deporting the people to the criminal element.
Let's take that into be really specific. In terms of the incentives, is that you mean E-Verify? Is that one of the big ones? Is the
well, you have to. Yes, E-Verify is one of the ways that you get rid of the reward and incentive by getting here. If you come, I had an asylum bill that I sponsored in the House. If you come here and claim asylum, the problem is you go before an administrative judge, and then you're going to get a date that is sometimes 5 and 6 years later. And so you go back to the court, to the administrative court, and you say, you know, my case is under adjudication. So what I really need is to be able to work here until then. So even though you came here illegally, some people went through the port of entry the proper way, but some snuck in, and then they claim asylum. You can do that. That's legal. But then they say, okay, now I have to work. Now I get free health care because I can just show up at a hospital. I get all the benefits that even a United States citizen doesn't get. That's the perversion and where they're at. And that's why the Democrats are pushing so hard here. So it gets really complicated really fast, but the president, I think, has to continue to make the case. Under Barack Obama, there were 80,000 people that were here illegally, committed a crime, got caught, got incarcerated, and then instead of deporting them, he let them back out into the interior of the United States of America. Let's deport those people. Guess what? You got to get funding, Mr. President. You are absolutely right. The president needs $25 billion. He doesn't need $5 billion. He needs $25 billion.
But
we don't even have an entry-exit system in this country, Steve. I go to my local Gandolfo's to get a sub sandwich, and they can tell me how many times I got the turkey sandwich. You cannot tell if somebody's come in and out of this country at all.
I know. I mean, this is what I'm saying. The whole thing is broken and a shambles and needs a complete
But this was
rethink.
the fault of Congress, not Donald Trump.
I get it. But, like, okay, now he's got a chance to fix it.
Yes.
And I'm trying to understand how, look, of course, we're going to talk about it a bit later in the show. Yes, I get it. He can do the national emergency, build the wall, fine. But what about all these more, in a way, you know, they're also just as important, the things you've been talking about. How does that, you need a deal for that, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I think part of the, I mean, Tammy was talking about doing it in phases. You have to be careful about the intervention of a presidential election. What Trump would not want to do is make the timing such that the Democrats can wait him out, get part of what they want, and then someone can run against him. And so the timing, election timing is a big part. And the last thing I might say is that in terms of his base, one concession, we have the most foreign-born in this country that we've had since about 100 years. So maybe a moratorium could be part of this as well. Not permanent, but give us some time to digest the current immigrants we have as part of this plan. The Democrats will never go for it, but I think it might be persuasive.